Oh, hi there. We meet again. Or, nice to meet you. So, quick question before we get into anything tonight. Do you remember the last time you caught yourself being not yourself? And I don't mean in a bad way. I mean the opposite. The moment you looked at something you used to believe, something you used to do on autopilot and went, wait, why am I doing this? That little moment right there, that pause, is what this conversation is actually about. Because here's what I've been thinking about lately. We spend so much time talking about growing up like it's something that just happens. Birthday comes around. You're older. Boom. Adult. Congratulations. Here's a tax return. But nobody talks about the other kind of growing up, the kind that has nothing to do with age, the kind that starts with a question. Let me tell you about someone. We'll call him Kai. Kai was the kind of kid who was, and I mean this genuinely, annoyingly easygoing. Not in an oblivious way, just light. He laughed at dumb things, forgot to stress about homework, and generally moved through childhood like someone who hadn't received the memo that life was supposed to be complicated. But here's the thing about Kai that even he didn't notice for a long time. Every now and then, not dramatically, not in some movie scene epiphany kind of way, his brain would just quietly ask a question about something that everyone else seemed to have already accepted. Why do people say sorry when they don't mean it? Why does everyone act different around certain people? Why do we do this thing? Like, why is this the rule? He didn't journal about it. He didn't become some brooding philosophical kid. It just ran in the background, like a system process nobody asked to install, but there it was, quietly doing its thing. He was still carefree, but something underneath was paying attention. And look, not everyone gets this early. Some people hit it at 15, some at 30, some after one specific conversation with one specific person that just cracks something open. And honestly, some people never quite get there, not because they're less capable, but maybe because nothing in their environment ever made them uncomfortable enough to start asking, which is its own kind of tragedy, but that's a conversation for another time. Let's continue Kai's story. Then came high school. And high school, as most of you probably know, is basically a live social experiment with homework attached. Kai started being around more people, old friends from childhood, new ones. And here's where it got interesting, because the ones he'd grown up with had changed. Not all of them. Some had genuinely leveled up, more curious, more thoughtful, more willing to sit with uncomfortable questions. But others had gone the opposite direction. Same jokes, same reactions, same ceiling. And Kai couldn't unsee it. Once the gap was visible, it was visible everywhere. He wasn't better than them. He wasn't smarter in any measurable way. But that background process, the one quietly asking questions since he was a kid, had been building something, slowly, without anyone, including him, noticing. By the time university came around, it started showing up in ways that actually mattered. He got better at reading rooms, not in a manipulative way, just in a I know what's actually happening here kind of way. He started sorting through people more naturally, not coldly, but with more clarity about who was actually worth the energy. He could sit with a problem longer than most because he'd been sitting with questions his whole life without needing immediate answers. He also got lonely sometimes, which is a whole other episode. But the point is, none of this came from a book. None of it came from a course or a mentor or a big life event. It came from a habit that started so small he didn't even know it was a habit. Asking questions. A lot of you guys must know this man, right? Socrates, the original guy who just would not stop asking questions, to the point where the city of Athens literally put him on trial for it. The charge? Corrupting the youth, which honestly is one of the most interesting things about him, not the philosophy textbook version, but the actual story. This was a man who walked around asking powerful people to explain themselves, politicians, generals, respected intellectuals. And every single time when they tried to answer, they fell apart. Not because Socrates was trapping them, but because the questions themselves revealed that nobody had actually thought that hard about what they believed. His whole thing was this: I know that I know nothing, which sounds like humility, but it's actually something more aggressive than that. It's saying, everyone who thinks they have the answers, look closer. You probably don't. They killed him for it, by the way, which says more about the people who couldn't answer than the man who kept asking. Now, same idea. Different century, different guy. You've probably heard of Elon Musk. And look, I'm not here to make this a fan video or a hate video. We're just using him as a reference point because it's relevant. One of the things Musk talks about constantly is something called first principles thinking. The idea is simple. Instead of reasoning by analogy, this is how it's always been done. You strip everything back to the most basic facts and build your logic up from there. When SpaceX was starting, he looked at rocket costs and asked, why does a rocket cost this much? Instead of accepting the industry answer, he broke it down to raw materials, aluminum, steel, fuel, and found out the actual materials cost about 2% of what rockets were being sold for. The whole company basically started from one well-placed question that nobody else in the industry had bothered to ask because everyone had already accepted the ceiling. And here's the thing. This isn't a genius move. It's a habit move. Musk didn't invent this. Socrates didn't invent it either. Humans have been doing it since the beginning. Think about it. We went from rubbing sticks together to FaceTiming across oceans. Not because someone was born smarter, but because somewhere along the way, someone sat down and asked, why do we have to do it this way? Every single leap in human civilization, fire, the wheel, the printing press, electricity, the internet, started with a question that someone was willing to ask out loud, even when everyone else thought it was unnecessary. Which brings us to right now, this moment. You and me talking to each other without ever having to be in the same room, maybe not even the same country, because enough people kept asking, why not, instead of, why bother? But here's the interesting part. Asking questions sounds easy. It sounds like a nice thing to say in a motivational post. Question everything. Great. Oh, love that. Except, and this is the part Kai figured out the hard way, the most important questions aren't the ones you ask about rockets or philosophy or society. They're the ones you ask about yourself. Why do I react this way? Do I actually believe this? Or did someone just tell me to? Am I growing, or am I just getting older? That last one especially. Because it's entirely possible to rack up years and experiences and still be running the same mental software you had at 16. Same assumptions, same fears, same ceiling, just with a better wardrobe. The people Kai noticed who hadn't changed, they weren't bad people. They just hadn't asked that question yet. Or they had, and decided the answer was too uncomfortable to sit with. Both are valid, by the way. Not every question leads somewhere nice. But the ones who asked anyway, they were the ones Kai found he could actually talk to. Really talk to. So, back to the question at the start of our conversation in case you forgot. Do you notice when you're not yourself anymore? Not in the bad way. In the way that means something shifted. Something got clearer. Something you used to accept without thinking. You can't accept anymore. Because if you do, that's not a problem. That's the process. You're not growing up. You're waking up. And honestly, it's one of the lonelier things you can do. And also one of the best. Leave a thought below. I'm genuinely curious. When was the first time you asked a question that you knew, even before the answer came, was going to change something? Until next time.